Alrighty, welcome everyone. I'm Tiabu and I am here to talk about the poll results. Last week I put up a manga reading poll, the very first of its kind, and probably not going to be the last of its kind, just based on the fact that there was a little bit of contention for the top slots in this overall poll. So, that's what I put up. I plan to read this manga starting next week, and we'll see what won. Well, I know what won, but I don't think I'm going to dilly-dally or with any further ado this. Let's just go ahead and go from, let's say, worst performance on the poll, monetarily, numerically, I don't know. Worst performance up to the winner. So the worst performing member of the poll was Dungeon Meshi, and that's kind of sad. More negative votes than positive votes. When I actually look at Dungeon Meshi on the graph, however, Dungeon Meshi looks to me like a big middle finger. And it looks like that because the meh count on Dungeon Meshi is very high, and the nah, no count is also kind of high. So not a lot of strong thoughts about Dungeon Meshi. Everything's sort of centered around that meh area. It doesn't have a lot of exposure. A lot of people don't know what it is or don't care about it. And then I think that when you look at Dungeon Meshi, and I don't know what that manga is fully about. I know that it's about cooking in dungeons. It's called Delicious in Dungeon. When you look at it, it kind of seems like maybe like a little bit of an episodic show or episodic manga that doesn't seem like it would go anywhere. Kind of like Isekai Shokudo, where it's fun and it's cute and it's cool, but it doesn't go anywhere. Now, I have the impression that Dungeon Meshi actually is much more of a story than it lets on with its covers and things, but can't get that across in a poll, and I'm not going to try to sway the results, so totally fair. Dungeon Meshi is the biggest loser in this poll, and that's sad for the Dungeon Meshi fans. Coming up next, and also quite sad, Naoki Urasawa's 20th Century Boys. Mystery, a little bit older, a little bit less high profile than some of these other things. I think it makes sense to me that this wouldn't get up there. Obviously, Monster is Urasawa's best known work, and I think that Monster would fare better on a poll, but of course, I've seen Monster, so I don't want to read Monster because I've seen Monster and I think that anime is really good, and I assume that it's a good adaptation of the work. So yeah, 20th Century Boys intrigues me. It may make an appearance on another manga poll in the future, but we'll figure it out after we figure out how this slot works. It did okay, but not amazingly. Still a dramatically positive score. The only show or the only manga that got a negative score on this poll was Dungeon Meshi. After 20th Century Boys comes Fire Punch. I'm surprised to see it this low in the poll. 112 positive, 274 positive, 162 negative, 112 total. Fire Punch also ended up being kind of in the meh zone, except that it's got a bunch of mehs and then also a bunch of hell yeahs, which is interesting. There's clearly some support for Fire Punch. Didn't seem to be a lot of negative energy around Fire Punch. Seems like something that people like and want to read or have me read, but not as much as the other things on the poll is how I'm taking this result for it. So that's cool and good to know. Next. And coming up in our third place, getting the silver, I know how medals work, getting the bronze medal for the day, is Dorohedoro. A bit of a weird one since we've seen the first season of the anime. It's like, okay, interesting. But Dorohedoro did pretty well, 295 total positive, 144 total negative. Most of those positives, however, were in the ya section, not the ya section. They were in yes, but not in hell yes. And that's kind of interesting. People are like, yeah, I'm down for Fire Punch. And then there are plenty of people who are like, yes, Fire Punch. Yes, Dorohedoro, I need it. But people are down for it, but not everyone is hyper excited about it. So that's interesting. That tells us at least something about it. There's definitely some like market penetration. There's definitely some exposure to this show. But honestly, not as much as I expected. Coming up in second place with 187 total, 356 positive, 169 nice, negative. Land of the Lustrous, Hoseki no Kuni. Having read watched the, God, I keep mixing that up. Having watched the first chunk of the anime and being uncertain whether there will ever be more, I was excited to see if this would win. And it didn't, but it showed admirably. It came in second. And what I want to point out is that the number of positive total votes for this show is only a couple away from the next thing, from the thing that won. and the number of negative total votes is only a little bit higher. So I think that moving forward into the future, that Land of the Lustrous has a very good shot at another poll. But for today, and for the short-term future of this poll slot, and this slot moving forward, starting next week, we will be reading Oyasumi Punpun. Good night, Punpun. A very well-known, very well-regarded manga that I know very little about except weird bird people, and also it's depressing, apparently. Because there were a lot of comments about Oyasumi Punpun being potentially depressing, or potentially interesting, or potentially weird, or people not being sure how it would mesh with my reaction style. Here's my take. Here's what I think. Oyasumi Punpun had 5 more positive votes than Land of the Lustrous, but it had 15 less negative votes than Land of the Lustrous. I got no real justification for that. Here's my thought coming out of this poll. I think Oyasumi Punpun probably is the piece of material on this list that has the most name recognition, but maybe not the most actual viewership or member watches, member reads and stuff. I think there are a lot of people who haven't read Oyasumi Punpun because it's got this reputation of being like some serious business. And I think that in and of itself is really interesting. In a weird way, and this isn't accurate, it just isn't accurate, I know. In a weird way, it reminds me, the way that I feel about Oyasumi Punpun, as I look over the scope of all these different manga that I could potentially read, I feel slightly similar to the way that I felt about going into Ginga Eiyu Densetsu at the very beginning of this channel. And that feeling was something along the lines of, this thing exists, and I know it's important, and I know I should get to it at some point. I don't know how popular it will be necessarily. I don't know how well it will lead to reactions, or how well it will lead to like my style of content. But I think it's important, and I think I need to get to it. And I think a lot of people haven't read Oyasumi Punpun, but want to. And I think, and this is pure assumption, I think they would like to do it with somebody like me. And I think that's really cool, and I'm super down. So my announcement is this. I am excited to join all of you, and for you to join me to watch Oyasumi Punpun to read Oyasumi Punpun starting next week, and we'll see how it goes. Because I will tell you that some of my best work in terms of my discussions, in terms of what I talk about, in terms of the value that I think that I can produce for y'all, come from certainly some of my best reactions and most fun reactions, and maybe the most popular, are the ones where the show is kind of like one of the hypebeast shows, right? Like Symphogear or Kimetsu no Yaiba, where there's this like shonen-y sort of fandom-y hype around it, and I love getting into that and talking about the passion that I see coming through a piece of media, and those discussions are always really fun. But I think that the most impactful discussions that I ever have are the ones where a piece of media shows perspectives on life experiences, and especially perspectives on life experiences that involve suffering and pain and difficulty and struggle, and especially I think the understated types of struggles that are part and parcel to certain types of human experience. Familial dynamics, personal relationships with yourself, depression, anxiety, those things. I think that when those come up in media, and I think that when they're well executed upon in media, it ends up serving as a really potent, really, really strong springboard for me to relate that to my own experiences, and for me to talk in a way that's relatable, and to parse the information that's coming through, potentially in an obtuse or complicated or compacted sort of way, as is the nature of media. It is condensed information. But to be able to, at the very least, unpack it from my own perspective and share that has been, for a long time, one of the things that I think I value most, and I look for in shows and in pieces of media. Not because I'm like looking for it necessarily, but when the opportunity arises, I think it's valuable and important that we talk about such things, and that people who have personal experiences with them are willing to share those experiences, so that others who are watching or experiencing or listening, in my niche audience that I happen to have, who might be experiencing the same things, can experience a little bit of perhaps camaraderie or solidarity, or an understanding that maybe their experiences aren't isolated, and that there is the potential for us to, through the experience of a piece of media and through the lens of fictional characters that see their world in particular ways, we can sort of address those concerns in a way that feels slightly disconnected from the painful realities of life and existence. And I think that's so powerful, and it's something that I really, 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 really value. And so, having heard, and let me just go through these, right? Because there's a question portion. There's a question portion that lets people write anything, right? Lets people write whatever they want as short response, and some of them are funny and some of them are cool. We get stuff like, "This is way too hard to choose, fuck man," or "Pun Pun is an experience, not for the faint of heart." Or "I have read all except Fire Punch. In my humble opinion, Oyasumi Pun Pun might get the most interesting discussion." Or "Oyasumi Pun Pun is the only manga I ever bought a physical release of, so hell yeah, it's mind-blowingly good." Or "Would really love to hear your thoughts on Pun Pun. It left me with so many feelings. Pun Pun would be mad depressing. IDK how that would translate to your reactions." So I've only read Oyasumi Pun Pun myself, and thus would only like to see the reaction to it at this time. Of course, it's also 10 out of 10. And then some people who have said things like Oyasumi Pun Pun is better suited as a private experience, which is something that I'll take into account. Now, to be clear with you, it is a private experience. I'm alone. I'm sitting here alone with a camera. I fully control my private experience. That I share it with you is that I share it with you. And I think that's okay. And I think that will be okay going forward. Reading a manga that may be private and may elicit certain types of emotions. We've done that. We've been through it in various shows. There have been shows where I've been tearing my hair out because of the way that characters act toward each other, or because of the way that they remind me of personal things, traumas, difficulties, things that cause me anxiety, distress, or remind me of depression. I'm fine with that. I'm totally okay with that, and I'll endeavor to be as open as I can, in a safe way with my boundaries intact, about talking about any of the things that are elicited by a manga like Oyasumi Pun Pun might, from what people are saying. I understand that you're worried about it, and I see that, but I'm not worried about it. I think it'll be pretty fucking great, and I think we'll do a good job. So, don't sweat it too much. We'll play it by ear. We'll play it as we go. And I'll stop going through these. There are a number of other comments, and some of them are fun and some of them are funny, but I just wanted to get into that a little bit and talk about, like, when you get a bunch of numbers in from people and you get all these, like, anecdotal pieces of thoughts, little paragraphs, little sentences that they've written along with their messages. And I don't normally go through and correlate those, or like try to figure out how the person voted when they wrote this particular. I don't care. I mean, I understand that maybe it matters, but I don't care. I just wanted to talk about why it's hard when you just get all those little bits of information to figure out exactly what that means. And obviously it's way better now because I've got so many more sliders, so many more bits of information to play with on this end, right? Because I've got all the scale, the ranking scale from the hell no to the hell yeah. That gives me a lot more information, right? Knowing that Dungeon Meshi didn't get trounced because people hate it, but instead was a middle finger shaped graph and got trounced because nobody cares and nobody knows about it is important to know. These are important things to know, but it doesn't entirely tell me the reasoning behind the decisions that were made in the poll. So I have to sort of assume things. I have to presume why did people vote for Pun Pun? And I think the answer is that a lot of people like it, that it's well known, that there's a sector of people that have never read it and would like to, and that some Venn diagram of all those people think that me reading it would work. And I would tend to agree. I think that I'm going to agree with that, and I think that I'm going to enjoy this going forward. So, we're going to leave off on the sort of reaction to the results sort of thing, and I will say that I will see you, at least the patrons of you, starting next week for the first chapters of Oyasumi Punpun, and I'm very much looking forward to it. If you have any recommendations for particular subtitlers or like translators, if there's any reason that I should do anything but official copies, let me know. I would default to official copies. I'm probably going to find a digital copy and download the entire thing, and will probably view it in an image viewer or something similar, since that's worked quite well for my purposes while reading JoJo's. But if you have any particular copy that you think is supremely better, let me know, and I'll hand that over to some of my mods and have them look into it more. And, of course, if you would like to get the earliest possible access to the first reactions, manga readings of Oyasumi Punpun, those will start going up on the Patreon soon. So check that out if you'd like to. It'll be linked down in the description. And check out, also to vote in future polls and stuff, and also to support me and make sure that I can keep eating so that I can keep making videos. Very important. And I think that's it, everyone. I think that's the whole spiel. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for following this poll and for voting in this poll. All 393, I think. Yep, 393 of you who did. Which I will mention, I forgot to mention it, is actually a pretty good showing. The Hypebeast poll had 500 and changed results. This one had 393 over the course of a week. And I think that anime is more popular on my channel than manga. It's also like a thing that we've been doing forever. And also I put like 4 of the most popular shows of the last couple of years on the Hypebeast poll. So that this manga poll got almost 400 responses is a pretty good indicator that there is some demand and some interest in this stuff, and that's very cool to know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for caring about these poll responses. I like doing them. They're fun. And thanks for voting in the poll. Thanks for helping make all of this happen. It wouldn't happen without all of you, so I appreciate your involvement in everything. I'll see you next week to start this show going. Peace.